So today I just want to welcome you along to our talk with Professor Reg Morris. So Professor Morris is currently the Clinical Director for Plymouth Clinical Psychological Training Programme, and he's joining us today he was the lead co-author of Rebuilding Your Life After Stroke. So he's going to talk about the book today and how that can help rebuilding your life, and then also he's going to discuss some aspects of acceptance and commitment therapy. So Professor Morris, welcome along. I'll just share the screen for you now.
Okay, thank you. Just a little bit about my background. As I'm a clinical psychologist, and I've been working in stroke services since 1996 in various parts of England and Wales, Western England and Wales. And the book came out of that work alongside some colleagues. So you have I think you can see a copy of the book on screen there. I have a physical copy of it here that I can show you. You can all see that. It's probably been blurred along the background. There you go. The book is designed to be used one-handed. It's got a spiral bound. It's spiral bound so that you can use it one-handed, and it's got lots of nice tabs and so on. Sorry, I've got a blurred background, and I should take it off. It's got excuse me, I'll just get rid of that blurred background. You don't see my yeah, okay. It's got some tabs and things to make it easy to use and navigate. It's got this kind of binding it's called a Canadian binding with the name down the spine. That's because it's on the book prescription scheme for England, and it has to go into libraries, and libraries won't accept books with just a ring bound like that because you can't see the title from when the book's on the shelf. So that's why it's got that. So it was designed to be usable, and it's a relatively small size book. So could I have the next slide, please? Okay. The reason for us developing the book is because psychological problems are very, very common after stroke, and in fact they're the most frequently reported issues, and they are associated with poorer outcomes and service costs. And there is no way, with the small number of clinical psychologists available, especially clinical psychologists working in health, that everyone can benefit from face-to-face contact. So we developed the book as a way of allowing wider access to psychological help. I also might add that I'm aware that you are using Neil Froude's Activate Your Life, and I think it makes a very good companion to Activate Your Life because it uses the same basic model as Activate Your Life as its core model. Okay, next slide, please. Availability of book. In discussions with Helena and others, I believe it's going to be made available in public libraries in the era. And it can also be purchased from Amazon at the crazy price of €25 at the moment. I should say that proceeds from sales go to NHS Wales because they help fund the development of the book. So next slide, please. So how was the book developed? Well, I know that in the audience there are quite a number of people who have had strokes, people affected by strokes. And this book was developed by a team of five psychologists working with service users and carers. And we asked some questions around, what psychological difficulties did they experience? What do they wish they'd known earlier? What would you want to see in a self-help book? And what would you advise others? What advice would you like to see others getting? And those are kind of initial questions which informed the writing of the book. I should say that the only decision I think that I'd taken originally was that I'd spent quite a few years working in stroke and looking for a therapeutic model that worked in stroke that could be used by staff, not just by myself, but by other staff as well. And I went through a number of options, including CBT. And I hadn't found another option that was suitable. They either involved too much training or they were too fragmented. Like CBT, there are lots of different flavors of CBT for different conditions. And I couldn't see a way that we could train staff to do all the different versions of CBT that would be necessary within the range of psychological conditions after stroke. So I settled on something called acceptance and commitment therapy, which is what's called transdiagnostic, which means it's applicable to lots of different conditions. And to give you a little anecdote, one of the talks we were giving using Activate Your Life, which is Neil's a program that Neil did and adapted the stroke for us. There was a member of staff who had been at the back of the room came up to me afterwards and said, I've actually been recently diagnosed with cancer, but I found the talk really helpful, even though it's designed for stroke. I find it very helpful for my condition as well. So there's a bit of anecdotal evidence that it does work across a wide range of conditions, although it is better to have a version which is adapted specifically for the condition you're looking at. So once we started writing it, we worked with the service users, and they were a very demanding audience, surprising as it may seem. We would write a copy, we would write a draft of the book, we'd give it to them, and they'd say, no, we don't understand this, no point in putting that in, change this, change that, reword that, and we'll rewrite it again, give it back to them again, sometimes a different group, and they come back to us again saying, no, we like quite some bits of it, but change these bits. So it took us about 6-7 months to go through various drafts to satisfy our service users before we got a draft that they were happy with. So next slide, please. I've talked to you about the book. It's in 2 languages. It's in Welsh and English, and obviously is capable of being translated into other languages as well. It could well be translated into Irish, and I believe there's a Portuguese translation on the way at some stage. There's also an audio book which is only in English that the Royal National Institute for the Blind did for us for people who are visually impaired. There are some links to materials. The audio book can be obtained with a voucher, which I've given you there from the Jessica Kingsley publisher's website. Jessica Kingsley published the book. And there's also video clips of interviews on YouTube. I don't know if it'd be, well, we'll look at that in a second, but there's also audio exercises. They're on Dropbox and have to be downloaded. I don't know, Helena, if you want to click on that YouTube example, if your system will allow you to go to YouTube, we could just look at that website quickly. Irritatingly, YouTube will put adverts on it. There's nothing we can do to stop that. So when you look at some of those videos, but that's the website with the different videos on it. There are more videos than that, and there are videos for different. They relate to the chapters in the book, and they all based on interviews with service users and carers, or carers, talking about their experiences and talking about the book. And these were the people that actually helped us write the book. So that's a resource, as well as the Dropbox audio exercises. So let's go back now to the video, to the PowerPoint. Okay, so those are resources and they're all linked. So what does the book do? What's included in the book? Well, there are lots of real stories and examples from survivors and carers that they gave us. There are lots of pictures in the book, lots of text boxes, written exercises, I think there are 10 written exercises, and the audio exercise, which I think there's 6, and links to the video interviews as well. So they're at the various stages of the book where it's relevant, we give you those links. The introduction, part 1 of the book just introduces you to the book and to why it's written and what it can be useful for. Part 2 of the book, it aims to look at individual psychological problems like sleep problems, pain, depression, anxiety, relationship issues, and so on, and to give sort of common sense advice really about how to manage those conditions, broadly based on CBT and neuropsychology, but also a lot of wisdom that we got from our service users and carers as well are included in that, about how they found it best to tackle those issues. Part 3 of the book is the nub of the book, is acceptance and commitment therapy, and it's about how to tackle more persistent problems that just won't go away. The distress that people continue to feel after they've tried maybe to use part 2 and it's not worked. And a lot of stroke issues are like that, that they're not easy to treat or to deal with on a self-help basis. So part 3 uses acceptance and commitment therapy. And part 4 is simply a summary and moving forward. So can we move on to the next slide, please? I realise this is not very good. You won't be able to see this, but the exercises in the book, basically there are 10 written exercises there, and there are 6 audio exercises, just to show how many that there are in the book. So if we can, I could give you an example of some of the exercises. If I can get mine. I mean, for example, there's one written exercise on how to untangle yourself from your thoughts and your feelings. There's a singing exercise about singing things to try to help with dealing with recurrent thoughts. And there's a repetition exercise, again, to deal with recurrent thoughts. And then there's some goal setting exercises. The audio exercises are around things like breathing space, a bit like a sort of relaxation of breathing space. One about dealing with thoughts, leads on the stream, how to deal with thoughts that are bothering people. And then there's an exercise on how to manage fatigue, how to, if you're constantly feeling tired, how to make your tiredness into something which doesn't overwhelm you. So just to give you some examples. So can we go on to the next slide, please? Okay, how can the book be used? Well, the first thing is, we wouldn't expect people to look at the book as a whole. It's really important that people dip in and out and look at parts that they're interested in. So if the person, for example, is suffering from anxiety, there's a section on anxiety after stroke. If it's relationship issues, there's a section on relationships after stroke. If it's depression, there's a section on that. So we don't expect people to try to read the whole book from cover to cover, but to use it as a resource. The book can be used by couples. It's very well, if people have partners, and not everyone does, but if they do, then if they work through the exercises together, or the partner supports the person with the stroke in going through the book, that can be really helpful, we understand. Another way is to be used alongside individual therapy or counselling. We've used this approach a fair bit in one of the charities, which is now called Bristol After Stroke. They ran acceptance and commitment therapy groups for stroke survivors and carers, and they also used the book, and people could get advice on the book from the counsellors who were doing the work. And we've done some research into this, and all the bibliotherapy work, all the research into using self-help books suggests having some input from a counsellor or a professional will help. It doesn't have to be very much, maybe just half an hour or an hour once every 2 or 3 weeks. So it's much less input than you get from individual one-to-one therapy, but it's helpful, and the book provides a link between the sessions. So the other way we can use the book is in groups, providing some structure for group sessions, and I know a number of clinical psychologists that use it as a basis for group work. So, okay, next slide, please. Staff, I think there are some staff here as well. The advice we would give to staff is that, when they make sure that people can get access to the book. They don't have to buy a copy. They should be able to get it from a library for free, and encourage them to read parts of the book that are relevant to them. So it's useful if the staff can work with the person somewhat, rather than just hand them the book and leave them to their own devices. It'd be worth going through it with them at first and thinking about, you know, what bits of the book might be useful to them, if that's possible. So invite them to pick an area that they want to work out, and if you're meeting with them regularly, agree on what they're going to do before your next meeting, that they're going to read that exercise, look at that YouTube video, do that audio exercise, and so on. Some people might need more support than others. I suppose that goes without saying, but some people might need more help, either from the spouse or a staff member, to use the book. But in general, most people find that with a bit of staff input, they can use it. Next slide, please. Right, a few pros and cons of the book. The pros are that psychological problems, it explains that psychological problems are normal. One quote that we had, and is in the book, I think, which very frequently we hear, is people saying, you know, I thought I was going mad. I was feeling totally overwhelmed. It shouldn't be feeling like this, etc. And I think one of the major messages of the book, that psychological problems after stroke are very normal, and most people will experience them. The book can give a wider range of people access to therapeutic intervention, much more than you could possibly manage even with groups. It's an accessible tool in 2 languages, and it can be made into different languages depending on the language that the person prefers for this kind of work. The cons is it doesn't entirely replace the need for therapists. And as we know, it's more effective with some therapist support. And what it means is, with a limited therapy support team, you can use your therapy support resource. It'll extend the use of it. It'll enable you to use it more effectively by using less of it with more people. So each person will need less of it. So you can involve more people by using the book, because they don't need so much therapy hours as they would if they didn't have the book. The other thing that we have discovered, it needs to be given to the right people at the right time. There is no point in it being given to hospitals to be given out on hospital wards when people are too early in the recovery process. They might even forget they've been given it, they've got other priorities about getting home, etc. We think that it's best given by organisations such as yourself, and by charities, and by aftercare services, where they can give it to people, the right people at the right time. Okay, next slide, please. Right. Examples from part 2. That we're given some examples of different parts of the book. I thought I'd just give you some show you what we actually do. This is the kind of things that may help, very basic strategies. And it's a resource for staff and carers. It's not rocket science. It's very straightforward and very simple, and hopefully you'll find the methods are clearly explained. Well, just touch on a couple of these, because I say it is very straightforward. But if you move to the next slide, this is the slide for depression. I know it's a bit dense. There's a photocopy from the book, but there's an interview on depression. That sign with 2 people at a table mean there's an interview, which you can find on YouTube, and it basically tells you about things that might help with depression, how you can cope with depression, and how you should try to keep yourself activated, and so on. And there's an exercise, a 3 good things exercise, that try to do 3 good things a day that you enjoy. So some basic advice, CBT based, I'd say, on depression. So move on to the next one. And here's one for memory. similar kind of thing. Some first to let people know that memory problems are very common after stroke, which makes it feel normal. A few quotes from people about their memory problems, and then on the next slide we give some hints and tips, which are very basic about keeping diaries and smartphones, tablets, and music, so on. Stuff you would find in most other resources as well about managing memory problems, but we thought it was worth putting them all together in one place. Right, so I think that's part two. So move on to the next slide. We now come to the nub of the book, which is acceptance and commitment therapy, which is how to deal with more difficult problems. And I've just selected two examples of the six. And if we move to the next slide, you'll see these 6 areas of acceptance and commitment therapy. If any of you have done the Activate Your Life, you'll know a bit about this, but it's essentially uses 6 different areas to achieve benefit. I won't go through them in any detail, but the first one is acceptance. So some people also call it expansion, which is being able to accept, come to terms with the condition that you have and the distress that you're feeling. So rather than trying to fight it, start by trying to find space for that in your life before then going on to deal with specific issues using some specific techniques like cognitive diffusion, which is distancing yourself from your thoughts and seeing yourself as part of a wider system, being able to look at yourself objectively. And then finally, the other 2 parts are about determining what your values are, what you want to do with your life. It's about goal setting, really, setting goals which you can achieve despite any disabilities or handicaps that you may have, and committing to achieving those goals. So next slide, please. So acceptance, I say, if you've done the Activate Your Life, you'll know all about this, but it's about not trying to fight negative thoughts, about accepting that we will have negative thoughts at times, and we will be distressed at times, and enabling ourselves to live with that level of distress and not make it worse by trying to fight it. So next slide. This is the basic message, which is that suffering doesn't come entirely from the thoughts themselves. A lot of our suffering comes from the struggle to control and eliminate the thoughts. Also from putting life on hold. So after a person has a stroke, they might say, well, I'm not going to do anything until I've got full mobility back, or I'm not going to go out until I stop feeling depressed, and so on. And also, people often turn to quick fixes like alcohol, smoking, drugs, etc., to try and hide the pain they feel, hide the distress they feel. But in the long run, these things aren't helpful. So next slide, please. And then there are some exercises, which these are Dropbox exercises, to help people to deal with painful sensations. I won't go into them, but you can download them from Dropbox. And the exercises will help you to deal with something which is giving you distress at that particular point in time. So if we move on to the next one, here's an exercise about breathing into your pain. It's a very common exercise, acceptance therapy exercise, where you take something which is giving you distress and use your breath, your breathing, as a way of accepting it and coming to terms with it, and making it less distressing for you. Not eliminating it, but enabling you to manage it and to incorporate it into your life in a way which doesn't create distress and disruption. So the next slide, please. And the second part, I just wanted to say a few words about, I know I'm running out of time, is goal, values and committed action. This is basically, I'll summarize what it does, which is enables people to determine what their values are, the things that they really want to live for, like being kind, being honest, being helpful, etc. So it helps people to develop their values and then to commit themselves to doing things that are in line with their values, despite any distress or handicaps that they may be confronting at that time. So setting some realistic value-based goals. And if you go to the next one, please. I've given you some examples there of values like compassion, generosity, honesty, helping others. And there's an exercise which helps you to identify the values. If you go to the next slide. Oh, it's gone into, should be. That's the one. It's the slide to help you identify values is your 90th birthday party. Imagine it was your 90th birthday party. What would you like people to say about you? And if you think about that, that will give you an idea of what your values are, the things that you really want, the value for yourself. And then you can use those values to develop goals. So if it's compassion, you might think, well, I would like to help other people. Therefore, what I'll do is I will maybe join a stroke group where I can contribute to the group and help other people with my experiences, and they can help me as well. Or it may be to do something for a charity, or it could be anything of that kind. It could be a smaller goal, like with your partner, I would try and do more to take the load off my partner, such as go shopping once a month or once a week or something like that. So there are any number of goals a person can choose, and in the book there are some ways to try and achieve them. So next slide, please. So that's the end. I think we've got time for discussion and questions now. I hope that introduction wasn't too quick and too much. And I'll be very happy to talk through with you anything that you want to know about the book.
Thanks, Professor Morris. So I'm going to just stop the recording now. If anybody has any questions, if you want to put your